Welcome to another episode of the RobinsonHewitt Pod. This is where we talk about the anthropology of technology and what it will mean to be human in the next era of tech. I'm your host, Alison Mackey. I'm a futurist professional director, anthropologist of emerging tech, and founder of RobinsonHewitt Consulting. So, what do we do at RHC? We're all about transforming the traditional with the unseen for the next era of innovation and ideas. We bridge the gap between the digital and human by blending technology, strategy, and future systems thinking to help enable human-centered innovation and transformation ready for the next era. Welcome. So last week we were talking about money, the future of finance, and this idea of learning your worth in a practical and tangible sense. We asked the question of what would you have to exchange if the banks and apps went down? And the intention behind this was to spark a different kind of thinking about value, about what you actually bring to the room, to a relationship, to your community, when your worth is more than just digits on a screen. And that question opened up a bigger door for us. And it's something I want to stay with today because it leads to somewhere bigger and something that impacts all of us. And it's on the forefront of a lot of our minds right now. And that's what I wanted to get into today. It's the future of work. It's not in like a LinkedIn thought leadership sort of a way, and not in a here's how to pivot your personal brand or, here's an email to sign up to. None of that. But what I want to talk about is what we actually contribute and what an economy built around this might look like, and why artificial intelligence is going to force transformation of all of it, whether we're ready for it or not. And I mean this in a true transformation sort of a way and not like a marketing rebrand, even though a fresh website never hurt anybody. But for most of us, if we're facing in the right direction and we have all the tools, we're going to be just fine to navigate this transformation. And what I offer today is an awareness that this is a new experience that we're all moving through together and not in isolation. So just a small note at the top of this episode, you are not alone in this. And if you dig into our content and our resources available online, you might find something useful even in the dark moments. So let's take a look at our current state of play when it comes to work and our economy. So we're in the middle of something that feels like disruption across the board, but it's actually more like pressure, and the kind of pressure that forces a shape change. And this is evolution 101 in real time. So AI is accelerating and the nature of employment is shifting underneath everyone's feet. And the old map of go get a job, stay in it, climb the ladder is becoming so useless for the majority of people. And the portfolio career is no longer a freelancer's work around this. It is becoming the structure that more and more people are living within, whether they choose it or not. And the invitation, if you can receive it as one, is to navigate this next era with curiosity rather than resistance. Because what's interesting from an anthropological standpoint is that we keep framing this as a crisis of work when it might actually be a crisis of self-knowledge. The question the shifting economy is asking, which is what do we uniquely have to offer, is not a question most people have ever seriously been encouraged to sit with. Our school system doesn't ask us of this. Most employment structures don't as well. You slot yourself into a role, you fill the job description, and the question of your specific and irreplaceable contribution gets bypassed. And AI is making that bypass completely impossible. When a machine can perform the task outlined in the job description faster and more consistently, and at a fraction of the cost as well, the job description stops being the point. But what becomes the point is everything else around it, everything else underneath it, and everything a machine cannot replicate. It's your judgment, your relationships, your unique way of seeing a problem, your capacity to make something that carries your fingerprint across it. This is your energy, your perspective, and the specific way you move around the world. It's your vibe, it's your energy, as the girls say. And if you know me, you know that I love to quote Jane Goodall. And she said that we have the tools to make the change, but do we have the will to make the change? And this is exactly where we are right now, because the tools are not the problem. If we have a computer, we have a smartphone, internet connection, and the willingness to use them in a way that we see fit, then you have more access to opportunities, to learning, and to reach than any other point in human history. The constraint is almost never the tools. The constraint is the will, the clarity, and the self-knowledge to use them in a direction that actually means something to you. In order to have a glimpse into the future, we have to take a little look back in time to notice the patterns. And I will keep saying this, if we want different, we have to do different. About 10,000 years ago, across many regions across the world, simultaneously almost, From the Fertile Crescent to East Asia to parts of the Americas, our nomadic ancestors started doing something completely new. They began domesticating plants and animals. And what's remarkable about this is that they began doing it more so less independently in different places roughly at the same time. We call this the Neolithic Revolution. And there are many theories about exactly what happened during this time, but the common thread across all of them is that the conditions were right, and humans, being the pattern-seeking and adaptive creatures that we are, we responded to those conditions. Now, the Neolithic Revolution is often taught as an ambiguous step forward, and in some ways, of course, it was. It gave us a sedentary life, specialization, the beginnings of civilization as we know it today. But the anthropologist Marshall Sahlins made a radical argument in 1972, describing the hunter-gatherer societies as the original affluent society. And not affluent in the material sense that we know it today, but affluent in the sense that their needs were relatively easily met, they worked fewer total hours, and they had more time for social and cultural life. Agriculture changed all that. Work became continuous, our diets became diverse, populations grew, but individual health also declined. This is where hierarchies also formed, and the people who controlled the surplus controlled everything downstream of it. And then we see another archaeologist, Jared Diamond, who went further in 1987, calling agriculture potentially the worst mistake in human history because it failed on its own terms. It was because it created a system that optimized for scale and efficiency while making individual lives harder, at least initially, and locked people into a dependency that they couldn't reverse. So once populations grew to a size that required agriculture to sustain them, there was no going back. And what I take from this is not a counsel of despair. What I take from it is that major transitions create trade-offs, and those trade-offs are not evenly distributed. The people with the clearest understanding of what they bring and the most flexibility in how they apply it tend to navigate these transitions better than those who are tied entirely to a single way of doing things. And that was true 2,000 years ago, and I think it's true today as well. Okay, so let's take a little look into my futuristic, idealistic visions. So where are we headed? I want to be honest that the framing of Industry 4.0, as most people in the tech industry kind of call it, leaves me feeling a little bit bleh. When people talk in the tech industry about the fourth industrial revolution, they tend to present it in a way that's kind of a continuation of the first, the second, and the third. It's the same pyramid, but different machinery. The top extracts from the bottom and the efficiencies accumulate upwards, while all the people doing the actual work absorb the transitional costs. And putting AI into an already extractive structure doesn't actually make the structure regenerative, it just makes the extractions faster. But I don't think that outcome is inevitable. It is one possible future, and the one we land on depends on a great deal of the choices being made right now, individually and collectively. And if you know me, you know I'm a huge fan of Doughnut Economics. It's a structure and a model that sets out the social foundation, the basic things that every human being needs to live well, which includes food, healthcare, education, political voice, etc., as well as understanding the ecological ceiling, the planetary limits that we can't exceed without a systemic collapse. So the goal here is to operate within a space between those two rings. It's a donut, right? And it's not about endless growth, not extraction, but a regenerative and distributed system that renews what it uses and share what it generates. It's a different measure of success entirely, and I think it's a more honest one and one worth taking note of. So when we pair this framework with where AI is taking us, something really interesting comes into focus. And if you know me, you know I also love the movie Her. And it gets referenced a lot when I have these conversations about potential outcomes and, what we're doing when it comes to AI. So a lot of people focus on the romantic relationship between the protagonist and the operating system within the movie Her. But what I find more revealing is what he actually does for work. So in the movie, Joaquin Phoenix's character actually writes personalized love letters as his job. So in this hyper-technological post-scarcity future that they present in this movie, his contribution in his work is deeply human, deeply relational, and supported by the technology surrounded him. And I think this is an accurate picture of what we could be heading towards if we completely sidestep dystopian narratives and really think about human value when it comes to work and what you would actually do. So the future of work is moving towards a skill-based economy. So it's not about roles or titles or the rungs of your career ladder, but the actual specific things you can do, the problems that you can solve, and the relationships you can hold, as well as the creativity that you bring to the table. So in a skills-based economy, the portfolio career is not a compromise or a fallback. It's probably the architecture. You might contribute to 3 different organizations in a single week. You might hold a cluster of capabilities that don't map neatly into a single industry. Or you might build something that doesn't even have a name yet because the category of it doesn't even exist. So the old pyramid isn't going to serve this transition. The future needs to be a distributed model where decisions are made closest to the relevant knowledge, where prosperity regenerates rather than depletes what it draws on, and where trust is built through consistent and transparent action rather than assumed through hierarchy. Is a structure that will sustain people through what is coming. And we have a breakdown of all of this in our own future-facing framework, and we have a whole white paper if you would like to read up on it. We'll link it below. This is not abstract theory that's coming through with this. It's a description of what has to replace the current system if what we want to come through works well. So let's bring all of this into today's context. So if this is the direction that we're heading, and I think it is, I think the question is, how do you orient yourself towards it today? And I want to be clear that I'm not prescribing a single path. Not everyone is meant to be on a stage. Some are meant to work the lights. Some handle stage management, the ticket sales, the logistics that make the whole thing possible. And some are supposed to sit in the audience, write the review, and in doing so, bring the next person in. Every single one of those contributions matter. I think the future of work is not about everyone becoming their own personal brand. I think it's about everybody recognizing that they have something to contribute that a job description has never fully captured, and then finding the conditions in which that contributions can actually be valued for what you're worth. So here's how I think about navigating all of this through our crawl, walk, run strategy. So at the crawl stage, you start with honest inventory. Not what's on your CV, but what you actually know how to do and what you would be doing if no one else was watching or paying you. So ask yourself these questions. What problems do you naturally move towards? What do people ask you for? What are you still genuinely interested in after the 10th hour? And I know it's a little bit self-help, but these are really practical questions that will lay the foundations for everything of who you are, what you can contribute moving forward. And without it, you're just applying new tools to an old confusion of who you are and what you have to offer. And at the walk stage, you start using what is already available to you. A computer, a smartphone, and an internet connection all give you access to learning, to markets, communities, tools that would have been incomprehensible 20 years ago. The barrier is starting to lower more than it ever has been. You can learn almost anything online, and you can reach almost anybody. Test new ideas at low cost and low risk. And going back to Jane Goodall, the tools are there. So the real question is whether you have the will. So in this space, this means making use of what is already within your reach. And finally, the run stage of all of this, you start contributing to something larger than your immediate output. This is where the balance between the personal and the structural become important. And I think a balance that everybody needs, not just entrepreneurs or founders. You need the creative, the generative, exploratory dimension of your work and who you are, the things that fuel you and keep you curious and alive and keep you doing what you're doing. And then you need the structural, the habits and the systems and routines that hold you in order when the world gets complicated. So without the creative, the structural becomes mechanical and it will eventually hollow. And without the structural, the creative stays beautiful but never fully lands. So running means being able to hold both, not perfectly, but consistently enough that they are reinforcing each other rather than competing. So the shift towards a skill-based economy and distributed contribution is not a threat to navigate around. It's an invitation to get clearer on who you actually are and what you're here to do. And if you're already facing in that direction, you have more than enough to work with. So what I keep coming back to with this is the Neolithic Revolution and a question that genuinely delights me. What do you think they would have done if they had the internet? Do you think the people of the Fertile Crescent would have stopped experimenting with their crops because someone in the Yangtze River Valley was doing something similar? Of course not. Because every group brought their own context, their own land, their own climate, their own specific and irreplaceable knowledge of local conditions. The ideas evolved with the people doing it, and it became uniquely theirs by necessity that no one else could replicate it. And I think about that when people worry about starting something and discover someone else is already doing it. But I think sometimes an idea is not a fixed object you can steal. It's a living thing that becomes what it becomes through the specific person cultivating it. Your version of something will always carry your particular tone, your particular experience, your particular way of moving through the world. And no one can take that from you. And if someone is replicating what you're doing, that is closer to a compliment than a threat. It is like someone coming and sitting at the piano to match your keys. They did not steal your tone or noise. They're harmonizing with it. And if we genuinely want a world where people are thriving and contributing, we have to be willing to let others up to the piano. It would be a real tragedy to have a masterpiece and refuse to let anyone hear it because you were too worried about someone else stealing your notes. And there is a conversation adjacent to all of this that I want to come back to in another episode around what it actually means to build something in this new paradigm and how businesses founded on something real and human-centered are going to navigate this transition differently than those who are simply applying new tools to old structures. But that deserves its own space. So for now, I'll leave you here. You have something to contribute that a job description has never fully captured. The economy is slowly and then very quickly beginning to ask for exactly that. Face the right direction. Use what you have. Trust that your contribution is real. So if today's episode got you thinking, you can come and join your journey with us. We post on Instagram almost daily to share our insights and inspiration for founders and future-facing leaders. It's a good place to stay curious. And if you're ready to go deeper, you can head over to our website at RobinsonHewitt.com, where we work at the intersection of anthropology, emerging technology, and long-term systems change to help future-facing leaders and founders and organizations transform, evolve, and build the next era. So be inspired and transform, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.